All right, let's continue our discussion on Stoicism, where we're going over the Meditations by Marcus Aurelius. We ended up in Book 8, and today I would like to talk about two short sections, 22 and 23. Concentrate on the subject or the act in question, on principle or meaning. You deserve what you're going through. You would rather become good tomorrow than be good today. And then 23, doing something. I do it with reference to the benefit of mankind. Something happening to me, I accept it in reference to the gods and the universal source from which all things spring interrelated. So there are two things I really like about this. The first is that 22nd section, especially the second passage there. You deserve what you're going through. You would rather become good tomorrow than be good today. So the deserve what you're going through, that's an interesting thing to think about, because that sounds a bit aggressive, but there is the interesting idea in Stoicism that you are being continuously tested and that all kinds of things happen to you. And William Irvine, a professor of philosophy, wrote a good book that came out fairly recently called The Stoic Challenge. And I think he explains this very well. So he says it's continuously a matter of trying to prove yourself, trying to think about what is happening to you, trying to accept what is happening to you, and trying to make the best out of it. And if being a Stoic is what you are trying to do, then instead of getting angry or upset, which are not really Stoic responses to what's happening to you, try to picture it as a challenge that is set out for you. A challenge where you get to prove yourself, where you get to prove your worth, your value, and are able to show your progress as a Stoic, where you accept that challenge and think, how can I make the best out of this situation? What can I do to make the best out of this situation? And how can I use this to grow? How can I use this situation to be the best version of myself? And when you think about it that way, although in some ways that may sound a little, I don't know if depressing is the right word, but a bit upsetting, because you're showing this, or you're facing all these challenges and you are continuously challenged. That may sound like a bad thing, but I've found that it's actually a very interesting way to approach life, because by thinking that way, of this or that is just a challenge where I can prove myself, I actually think that's a very nice thing, because you prove not so much to others, because the Stoic mind would say, who cares about what the others think? You prove this to yourself. You prove to yourself that you are a good person, that you are a helpful person, that you are someone who makes progress, someone who is not upset by the things that happen to you, right? And I think that viewpoint of everything being a challenge has been very helpful to me, because you still get that flash of annoyance of, why is this happening, or why do I have to go through this? But it's just a challenge. It's a challenge to prove yourself. And I think that's kind of an interesting way to look at things. Then there is that second passage. Doing something, I do it with reference to the benefit of mankind. Something happening to me, I accept it in reference to the gods and the universal source from which all things spring interrelated. So there too, I think that you can look at what is happening to you as something that just had to happen at that point in time. It was just bound to happen. And I had to think of this recently, or I have been thinking about this recently quite a lot, when 2 weeks ago I had done groceries in the evening, and I drove home. And as I was driving home, I thought, well, instead of turning here, let's take the next turn. This wasn't a highway, but let's go there because it's a little busy. It was still the aftermath of rush hour. Let's take the slightly longer way home, but it's a bit quieter. And it's a bit of road where you can do 100, and then there's a left turning lane, and I'm going somewhere with this, trust me. And I turned into that left turning lane, and there was someone stopped before me, and she was just waiting, and I stopped behind her, and we were both waiting to turn left. And I remember thinking to myself, wow, there's a lot of oncoming traffic here too. And all of a sudden I heard a loud bang, and then my car shot forward, and someone had rear-ended me at I would say a pretty considerable speed. And all kinds of things started to happen. So initially you're a little dazed, and what just happened? And then it was a safe place for me to get out of the car, so I got out. The lady in the car in front of me immediately got out. I didn't hit her car, for the record. Yay! Enough space. She asked me if I was okay, and I said, well, yes, I am okay, just a little shook up. And immediately from the other side of the road, a gentleman came running up and said, hello, I'm an off-duty police officer. I saw this happen. Please get the car out of the way. And, anyway, I'll save you the rest of the details of the story. The most important detail, of course, is everyone was fine. Nobody was injured, I think, in any serious manner, just a bit shook up. But both cars were totaled. And anyway, I will refrain from giving my opinion on this, to the extent that I don't fully understand how this much damage was done. But it was. And there are all kinds of things that you can feel then. There's a lot of adrenaline, and then that subsides. But what I found interesting was that at no point was I angry. It's easy to be angry and to start shouting at people and, what the hell are you doing? Why aren't you paying attention? Because I find it hard to believe that the other driver was paying close attention, because I'd been stationary for about a minute, and it was dusk, and my brake lights were on, and the road was clear. There was no snow on the road, there was no ice on the road. So two cars are stationary for quite a while, and you just plow into the back of one. But the reality is, it only takes a second, right? A second of just not paying attention, and these kinds of things can happen. As I said, the little stretch we do 100 kilometers an hour, so you come up to that turn at considerable speed. But I wasn't angry, and I thought to myself, from a Stoic viewpoint, what would you now do as a Stoic? Well, anger is not very successful or useful in such a situation. The most important thing, I still believe, is that no one was hurt. No one was actually injured. And that's really what matters. And everything else is annoying. You have to deal with insurance. I had to deal with police. There was police on the scene. You have to, maybe it was a little easier because I don't think in any scenario I could be pointed at as the one who was at fault, given that I was already stationary. I didn't just stop suddenly. I was completely stationary for quite a while. But the anger wasn't there. it's frustrating to have to deal with all these things and a lot of stuff and paperwork and things. But at the end of the day, what does the anger add to that situation? It just makes it worse. So I tried to not feel that. And I find sometimes I keep thinking in those cases a little bit of Robert Downey Jr.'s Sherlock Holmes, with this mustn't register on an emotional level. You have to be careful with how you use that, but in this case that really was how I felt. This mustn't register on an emotional level. At this point, on the scene, you have to be collected. There is no room for anger or, at that point, I think even sadness or you have to try and be level-headed. And I succeeded, I would say, about 70% of where I would want to be, because you are shook up and the adrenaline is rushing through your body. I was asked to fill out a collision report in the car, and it was cold. It started to snow at that point, but because of the adrenaline and then the adrenaline wearing out, I was shaking so badly. It was hard for me to write, and it wasn't just the cold. It was the little bit of shock after that, the adrenaline. What I'm trying to say is, I think, two things. One thing is, things will happen to you, and sometimes there's nothing you can do about it. In this case, there was nothing I could do about it. Even if I would have seen her in my mirror, I wouldn't have been able. I couldn't move forward because there was a car before me. There was oncoming traffic. There was another lane, but people are rushing by at 100 kilometers an hour, so I couldn't just slip into that lane. So I don't think there was anything I could have done differently. But it will happen. Many things in life will happen. And oftentimes, not always, but oftentimes, there isn't anything you can do. And I had thoughts later, if only I would have picked up the limes I would have wanted to buy, I had wanted to buy, and I forgot. Maybe I wouldn't have been hit. Maybe just would have been 5 minutes later, I wouldn't have been hit. Or if I take the other route home, I wouldn't have been hit. But then maybe something else would have happened. Who knows? It's hard to say what would have happened in that scenario, right? Because you don't know. That was a version of reality that was not played out. Maybe if I would have taken the other road home, I would have hit a deer. Or maybe a massive semi-truck would have hit me and I wouldn't have made it. Who knows what would have happened? But what did happen, happened. And all I could do was then try and deal with it as well as I could, without letting it upset me. Now, I'm not trying to make light of this. This was a fairly easy scenario because no one got hurt, right? I mean, if this would be an accident with people actually injured, that might be a lot harder to do, I would imagine. But again, that did not happen. What happened, happened. And then you deal. It's just it, then you deal. I hope this wasn't particularly rambling. I was just trying to make the point of things will happen, exactly as Marcus Aurelius says, right? Something happening to me, I accept it in reference to the gods and the universal source from which all things spring interrelated. This came to me from the universe. Call it fate, call it God, call it providence, call it an absolute coincidence. It doesn't really matter. It happened. And you deal with it. The anger won't make it better. The frustration won't make it better, although some things are frustrating. Dealing with these things is frustrating. But the most important thing is no one got hurt. The cars are totaled. Well, that's very unfortunate. But better the cost than you, right? So that's just what I was thinking about a lot this week. Things will happen to you. And again, the very Stoic, basic thought. You may not be able to control what happens to you, but you can always control how you react to it. And that can make all the difference. So that's it. I will leave it at that for this week. I hope, again, that this was not too rambly. I just kind of wanted to share this and try to give you a practical application of how I try to apply this stuff to my everyday life, because this is not just an academic exercise. I mean, I also want to apply these things, right? That's why I do this. And I hope that was useful and may have given you something to think about. And that was it. So I'll gladly see you again next week for more talk about Stoicism. Bye. Bye. Bye.